3 wins on the spin, back-to-back clean sheets, and through to the 5th round of the FA Cup with a 1-0 win at Wolves. How quickly the mood has changed at Norwich City. Dave Freezer here, alongside Paddy, Davitt and Connor Southwell, to look back on that victory at Molineux in the latest edition of the PinkUn Norwich City Podcast in association with Future Radio 107.8 FM. Boys, how are we doing? Pat, if I come to you first, we are recording the pod Monday morning instead of Sunday because of the FA Cup draw, and we had to wait for the Liverpool Cardiff game to finish, didn't we? But just how excited are you to go to Anfield twice in less than 2 weeks?
No, that's not the word I'll be using. Excitement. Annoyance is a better word, I think. I'm raging, and this is poor us, poor media types getting to go and watch these games and not have to deal with the financial element of what's involved, and also the time off as well for any actual fan. But because we spend so many hours in a car, miles on the road, the prospect of 2 trips, because obviously they're there in the league. I think probably only about 10 or 11. I know as we record, the actual day for the tie hasn't been set yet, but I did see last night that they're in the Sunday before, they're in the League Cup final, aren't they? They're at Wembley against Chelsea, which you would think would rule out the following Tuesday. So I think Wednesday, March the 2nd, subject to confirmation, is looking likely. And if that's the case, then that is 2 long trips to Liverpool in the space of 10 or 11 days, and
with Southampton in between.
Is that right? I didn't really. You made my mood even worse. that was the plan. So we can't wait to get our teeth into that. But parking all of that and the self-indulgence of that element, as a draw, it's as tough as you could get. Maybe Man City away is the exception. And I watched bits and pieces of that Cardiff game, and they've got the guy whose name escapes me now. They brought in January, the Portuguese lad. Is it Luis something or other, attacking wide player? Diaz, yeah. Do your research, and then the young lad who's come back from injury who scored, Harvey Elliott, is it?
Yeah, great goal.
And you're seeing Trent Alexander-Arnold on there, and then of course later on Sunday evening, Mo Salah goes up against Sadio Mane in the final of the African Nations, and both of those are not even available at the minute. So but will be when Norwich roll into town. So, difficult as it comes, really. And as Dean Smith said, immediately after the game on Saturday, after beating Wolves, and was asked about the draw, anyone at home really, because they've now gone to Charlton, they've gone to Wolves, and unfortunately his prayers haven't been answered, and they're going to go on the road again, and possibly as tough a destination as you could find. So, I think we all know that the probability of them getting through is not overly high, but hey, they'll go there, and I guess ultimately Dean Smith won't publicly admit it, but of the 2 trips, if they could come back down the road with a point or even 3, but out of the FA Cup, I think we'd all sign for that now. But yeah, no, it's absolutely horrendous. Probably shouldn't say it. If I had a cat, I'd be kicking the cat. But obviously, I'm not into animal cruelty in any way, shape, or form. But it was a disastrous turn of events when that. Who did the draw? Actually, now I forget now who. Andrew, as he's known. Yeah. So go back to being called Andy, maybe. But no. When was the last? I mean, I'm trying to think. When was the last home draw they got in a cup competition? Because it just feels like we've been permanently on the road in these cup ties. I'm sure there has been one.
Yeah, they play Liverpool in the League Cup earlier in the season.
Yeah, there you go then. Yeah, but
the Man United quarter-final was home, wasn't it?
That was Man United, wasn't it? Yeah. So maybe it doesn't. It just feels that it's a permanent away FA Cup / League Cup. But 4 games against Liverpool, as it will turn out now this season. That's hard basket, but those are the cards. Dean Smith and his players will have to play them, and hey, if they rock up at Anfield and they're still on this sort of upward curve, then I think there will be, despite the realism, I think there will still be optimism. They can go there and give a very good account of themselves, because, as I wrote on Sunday, you can now look at the fixture list with actual optimism rather than maybe trepidation, and that's all on the basis of 4 wins in 5, and most recently Wolves in the FA Cup Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought you were going to go. I watched In the Loop recently, and I thought you were going to go full on difficult, lemon difficult in the middle of that rant at one point. I realised after the draw as well. I mean, obviously we're waiting, and it's Liverpool or Cardiff, so you can't really win in terms of long trips anyway. But Cardiff don't pull off an upset. We then realised that I booked off that week, haven't I? Because there wasn't a midweek game in the schedule, so I may be dodging the second one to Anfield. I'm afraid, boys. But also that's in between two very important games for Norwich: the trip to Southampton on the Friday night and the home clash with Brentford on the Saturday. So. As much as nobody expected Norwich to go and knock Tottenham out 2 seasons ago, and they managed to do it on penalties. We know that those 2 games are going to be the ones that take precedence, that are going to have to take precedence because they're huge. And thankfully, we can now turn attentions to Wednesday night against Crystal Palace with real enthusiasm, can't we, Connor? Because this has just been the shift in narrative that has happened in what feels like quite a short space of time. Dean Smith being nominated for Premier League Manager of the Month, 4 wins in 5, all the positive elements to this. All of a sudden, everybody's just, well, I'm sure the fans, players, everyone are absolutely buzzing for Wednesday night already.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much momentum, isn't there, at the moment in terms of what they're doing. And I tweeted at the end of the game on Saturday, but I think there's a real improvement for Norwich as well. Different areas of the game, we saw them switch to a different formation, which is maybe not been as beneficial to them as the 4-4-2 has been recently, and they performed it very well. They defended excellently. They were organised. They were tough. They were a bit niggly as well. Maybe not as niggly as people are pointing out, but they definitely had that edge to them, which they haven't had in recent games. So I think there's lots of reasons to be cheerful. This ultimately was a clean sheet. I mean, part of the fact it was an FA Cup, Wolves have the second best defensive record in the Premier League, behind Manchester City. So they don't really concede goals. Okay, they don't score a huge amount either, but they haven't lost too many games this season. And for Norwich to go there and put in that level of performance, and I think if we're being truthful, it probably could have and should have been a lot more than it was, because of the chances that they created. Adamida had 2 in particular that he should have converted. So, I think there are lots of reasons to be cheerful and lots of reasons to be optimistic. But ultimately, it's going to hinge on Wednesday, isn't it? Because if they go and lose on Wednesday, it feels like with Manchester City and Liverpool, the road ahead is significantly tougher. If they win, then they bounce into those games, and really they're kind of free hits for them, aren't they? They can go and be competitive and hope to replicate the performance they showed against Manchester United, which everyone was really encouraged by. So, yeah, it does feel, maybe it's a bit early to say it. I wouldn't fully want to commit to they've turned a corner, whatever, but I was thinking this on the way back from Saturday's game. If you take out that December period where the squad was decimated with COVID, injuries, illness, whatever, and you just look at Dean Smith's games, taking that period out, a lot of them have been very, very good, if not results and performances. Even Spurs, where they lost 3-0, I think we walked away from that saying that they were pretty encouraging, and had they've taken their chances and whatnot. So I think there's reasons to be cheerful, but actually there's tangible reasons why people should be feeling encouraged by what they're seeing at the moment. And a win against Palace, I think we're going to build it up throughout this podcast. It's such a massive game for Norwich City in the grand context of their season. But if they can record another 3 points, then they're very seriously in the mix to stay up now, games in hand or no games in hand. So it's massive, and they bounce into it with a lot of confidence, which I think, given where everyone was 2 or 3 weeks ago, where they were all on the floor and they were all sort of begging for mercy, really. And we saw what we saw at Palace. Some of the chanting there. It feels like the season's completely flipped now. So they've got to grasp that while it's there. They've got to use it in the right way, and they've got to start on Wednesday against Palace, because, as I said, if they can win that, then it sets up, I think, a lot of encouragement for the games ahead, and it would be much needed, really, ahead of 2 of probably the toughest games that you can get in world football.
Yeah, there was even a smattering of "you're not fit to wear the shirt" at Palace, wasn't there? So how quickly times have changed. We'll part the Palace game just for a little bit there. We'll come back to that in part 2 of the pod. We'll just have a review of the Wolves game first, and then I want to bring you a bit of audio from my chat with Kenny McLean after the match, because that was nice to speak to him, obviously the goal scorer as well. But the last time we spoke to him was on Boxing Day after the 5-0 defeat to Arsenal, and he was very, very low in his tone that day. So it's nice that he got to come out and speak about a win. So I was always used to feel a bit sorry for Russell Martin back in the day, that he always seemed to get rolled out after defeats. He never usually got the sort of glory moments, and that probably translated into how fans thought of him sometimes, maybe a bit unfairly. It should be emphasised that Wolves only made one change to their team. They were in very good form. They'd won 4 of their last 5 in the Premier League. That change was in goal, bringing John Ruddy in for Sarr. So they went strong. Raul Jimenez was on the bench, okay. Adama Traore had gone out to Barcelona, but he hadn't really been fitting into their plans particularly well this season anyway. So he goes off to Barcelona with their best wishes, I think. But it's fair to say, isn't it, Pad, that they could have been 3-0 up at half-time if Adam Eder had his shooting boots. But it was 4 changes initially, which was McGovern coming in for Angus Gunn in goal, Byram in for Max Aarons right back. Sorensen obviously was injured. Looks like he's probably going to be out for potentially the rest of the month, although Dean Smith hasn't put a definite timeline on that one yet. So you've got Gilmour and McLean coming back into midfield as Connor's teed up in a 4-3-3. And Pukki also dropping to the bench. But then there was one further late change. Josh Sargent was feeling unwell. So about 50 minutes before kickoff, they had to make the change and bring Poeta in on the right. But that first half, Pad, was a weird one, wasn't it? Because you could feel how disappointed the Wolves fans were. And they are quite... it doesn't take much for them to moan at their team, does it? The sort of Molineux faithful. And they weren't happy with what they were seeing at all. And Norwich really could have... put their sort of foot to the floor a bit better.
Yeah, and it was strange, given, as you rightly pointed out, like they've gone into the game in very good form and must have been confident. They've had that momentum as well. If you look at their league status, they're in the top 8 at the minute. So the lethargy and the lack of intensity, if I was a Wolves fan, I'd be seriously questioning that because, you know, with the greatest respect, they're probably going to fall away in terms of getting a European spot by their league status. But as Dean Smith said on Friday, clubs in the Premier League enter it the 3rd round. Bit of luck that Norwich aren't getting with the draw, perhaps, but not that many games to get yourself to a Wembley final. And then we've seen it recently down the years, the likes of Wigan, pulling off upsets that nobody would have really banked on. And if I'm a Wolves fan, I'm very, very unhappy with the meekness of the second half. They had a go, but they were going to have a go because I'm sure Bruno Lager and his coaching team really got into them at half time. But the tone was set in that first half, and Norwich, not that they needed really much invitation, but they did accept the opportunity to get on the front foot. And yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, they got their noses in front right at the end of that first half, but Adam Eder in particular, and you look at the highlights again, and that chance that Rashica puts through and he's got Ruddy to beat. I mean, you'd have just thought the frame of mind that lad must be in after, Everton and West Ham before that. And even Watford, he got the assist for the final goal that night. The confidence, I mean, it was very, very similar, actually, same competition. You go back to, his really headline-grabbing arrival in the Norwich first team, which was Preston away, FA Cup 3rd round a couple of seasons ago. And I think his first goal that day was similar. Ball was fed through to him. He basically got the keeper to beat and unerringly accurate finish. And I was expecting the same, but that probably typified his overall performance. I just thought he was off the levels he'd shown, particularly against Everton, but Watford and West Ham. His general play, he got a little bit bullied by Wolves, his muscular sort of defensive 3. But as was proven, he still had opportunities to get himself on the score sheet. And that, not that there was too many negatives to take from Norwich's performance individually and collectively on Saturday. But that, with, as we were discussing prior to the game, games on the horizon where they're probably Norwich are only going to go one up top against the likes of Liverpool and United because they're not going to concede the initiative in terms of manpower in the middle of the park to those teams. Sorry, Man City and Liverpool. I think that was a bit of an audition for him against Wolves, and I don't really think he grasped his opportunity. So, obviously we've got the Palace game in between, but I think Pukki would probably be, if Dean's only going to go with one up top in those 2 games that come after Palace, I think it's probably going to be Timu now because Adam didn't really put his foot to the floor. And that just reminds me of what Dean Smith did say after the Everton game, that going into the Watford game, he more or less challenged Adam, I'm sure privately, but also publicly, that you've put one decent performance on the ledger at West Ham. You followed it up against Everton. Can you do a third one against Watford? Well, he did. But I don't think he probably necessarily added a fourth one, really, for me, against Wolves. And that's the challenge. That's where he is now. If he wants to make that leap to becoming an actual bona fide starter week in, week out, his levels can't afford to drop. And maybe that's a touch harsh, because strikers all miss chances, even the very, very best strikers. And you might argue, well, he got himself into those shooting positions. But, he's at this stage of his senior career now where he needs to grab every single opportunity that comes his way. And he had 2 or 3 chances there to get another goal or two to his tally, and just give Dean Smith another nudge that, you can rely on me. I'm your man. I can operate at this level, and I can impact positively at the top end of the pitch. So probably on reflection, a little bit overly harsh to sort of single him out, but ultimately, he's in a situation now where he needs to really tuck a chance like that away. When you've got a keeper to beat, and all the cards are in your hand. I mean, I thought, looking at the highlights again, he could have even gone round Ruddy. Ruddy isn't the most mobile of keepers, certainly not at the age he is now. I think if he'd have just took a touch around him and then you're slotting it into an empty net. But I'm not going to tell Adam Eder how to score goals. He knows exactly how to score goals, and hindsight is always a wonderful thing. But it just felt, it typified his all-round performance, that it was a little bit off, a little bit out of kilter, and it wasn't the clinical razor-sharp precision that we saw, particularly in that Everton game.
It's difficult, isn't it, when you're a solo striker up against a back three, and a good back three. They're amongst the best Premier League defences in the league. Max Kilman is like a rugby player. He's huge, isn't he? Conor Cody, we all know, plays for England, and Totti, I thought, was pretty impressive on the left as well, and seems to have been someone that's really emerged for them. So it almost came across a bit like he was feeling like, well, what am I supposed to do up against these three? I mean, if you look at him statistically in comparison to the games recently, when he's got all the praise and he's had Pookie up there with him, I made this point in the 6 things, which of course you can read at PinkUn Plus, $1.99 a month. You'll keep hearing us banging on about it. The stats wise, I think Sargent's absence, if you're going back to a 4-3-3, was really felt in terms of helping Eder to not feel more isolated. So I've got them in front of me again here. Sargent against Everton won 4 aerial duels. Against Watford, he won 8. On Saturday, Poyeta, unsurprisingly, won none. So he wasn't really able to get any of those little flick-ons and things like that to Eder to allow him to hold things up. But agreed, just his general performance level didn't feel like he was on his level, because there were a few times where he could have probably won the ball in the air or held it up, and his touch just wasn't there and stuff. But with that first chance, he had the space to open it up and get it onto his right, and either then you've got both options, haven't you? A bit like Dowell had with that chance, which we'll come on to in the second half, where he could have gone bottom right. So he will know all too well that he should have been scoring, and that really would have kept things bubbling along nicely for him. But thankfully, this move with Kenny McLean works out. He insists afterwards that it was pre-planned, that it was something they'd worked on in training, and we've all seen the evidence that is what McLean does. He always goes to the near post. He does it defensively as well, doesn't he? So I think we can give him the benefit of the doubt there in terms of believing him. But after half-time, Connor, we all expected a response, and it did come, didn't it? And Norwich had to really dig in, and for a little while, I think up in the press box, we all felt like the tide had turned and that they were probably going to find a goal. But hitting the post in particular, they pushed hard, didn't they?
They did, yeah. And when you think back to that period, beyond Podence hitting the post, and Norwich is probably fortunate that he scuffed the effort a little bit, because otherwise I think that probably would have found the bottom corner. But beyond that, I mean, they didn't construct anything that required Michael McGovern to pull out a really top save, or that caused any undue concern sort of in front of goal necessarily. It was just a lot of territory, a lot of crosses that Norwich dealt with quite well in the whole, and that's why I think when we talk about their performance, we ultimately talk about how sort of dogged they were defensively, how sturdy they were, how organised they were. It wasn't just a back 4 defending; it was a back 10 defending essentially. And even though we talk about Eder quite rightly, there were a couple of stuff that he did kind of off the ball, which helped Norwich a little bit. And I agree, it's a technical point, but I don't think he's getting his body between the ball and the man near enough, and that's probably meaning he struggles with holding the ball up, and it's a lot harder when you're playing up front by yourself. But yeah, I mean that period is the type of one within games when they do take the lead and are away from home that they're going to have to ride out. And if that situation arises again, then I think they've got a perfect blueprint of how to do that, based on what they did on Saturday. But I think also what we've seen this season really is when Norwich do take the lead, as a general rule of thumb, they've been pretty good at seeing it out. Which, is quite funny considering that either their position in the league or how many wins they've got on the board or whatever. So, I think when you look at Dean Smith and we talk about his improvements and people ask, well, what's the main thing maybe that he's changed? You can see a defensive structure, a willingness for them to work for each other, a pragmatism, but also an understanding of what to do when the ball is in a crossing position. Right, Grant Hanley takes this position, Ben Gibson takes this position, Brandon Williams does this. It all feels very rehearsed, very natural. So it seems to come natural to them, and I think that's been shown now by back-to-back clean sheets, which, forget wins. I mean, the fact that Norwich City haven't conceded a goal in their last two competitive games, I mean, that seemed unthinkable a month or so ago, where they couldn't score and were shipping 2 or 3 goals a game. So I think what we're seeing now slowly but surely is Smith, Shakespeare, Liam Bramley as well, all these people on the coaching pitch and their ideas. I think we're beginning to see them come to fruition. It's been a very tough period because not only have all the issues that we've mentioned earlier on in terms of mitigation been happening, but also he hasn't had a lot of touch time with the players in terms of training. I think they had 6 days off, but they had a really good portion of time to work on things. They've got a game on Wednesday, which is tough, which again makes the period they had beforehand so crucial. So I think he'll cherish whatever he can get on the training pitch, and I think we're seeing it, because when he came in and he sat down in his first press conference, he said the goal is to make Norwich City harder to beat. Well, they're tougher to beat now, undoubtedly, and I think maybe the true acid test of that will be against Manchester City and Liverpool, against whom they really rolled over in the well. Liverpool, I thought they played quite well on the opening day, to be fair. Manchester City away was very tough, as it is for most teams. But it's going to be really interesting to see how he sets them up and how they play against those two sides. But yeah, I think you have more confidence watching a Norwich City side defensively, and there's a lot more structure and a lot more sturdiness about them, and there's a real spine to that team now. So yeah, I think they deserve credit because they look well coached, they look capable of keeping teams out, and beyond that shot that hit the post, I didn't really feel that McGovern was properly tested. They had a few late headers that went over the bar, but beyond that, I thought they defended their goal pretty well, to be honest.
Yeah, there was a nice attempt, wasn't there, when Podence floated that corner deep and Neves met it on the edge of the box, sort of Beckham Scholes style, but he didn't really get the power behind it. It was a nice connection, but in terms of Norwich, they rode out that storm, didn't they? And then Kieran Dow really should have been scoring. John Rowe sort of starts the move, lovely 1-2 with Pookie, and then it's almost like a penalty. Then he's got a defender between him and John Ruddy, and given he's left-footed, you think that bottom left corner just looks like it's perfect for him to tuck it away where the bigger gap is. But I guess he's tried to sort of do the unexpected and go to his right, and then John Ruddy guesses correctly and stops him, which is a shame, because that would have been a big moment for him. And at that point, Norwich had switched to a 4-2-3-1, hadn't they? And he was actually getting to play as a 10. So probably a penny for Todd Cantwell's thoughts, given that he's gone out. But we will come back to that in just a little while. And as we hinted at earlier, 6 yellow cards. That never happened in Daniel Farke's reign. So over 200 games, 208, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. They got 5 on 6 occasions. I went and had a look back, and I went back as far as I could to see the last time Norwich had 6 in a game. And I couldn't find it, basically, in terms of how far back records go. I could only get sort of accurate across the season all the way back to the 2011-12 Lambert Premier League season. And I couldn't find a game where they'd got 6 yellow cards. So, a couple of them for time wasting from McGovern and Williams, which they're quite happy with. Similarly with Hanley, he just sort of barges John Ruddy to make sure that he's not getting a quick throw out. And, it's those sort of little streetwise things which are good. Kenny McLean just took one for the team, essentially, didn't need to stop an attack. Lise Malou and Norman were, I think, a little bit more annoyed that they got booked for challenges, but both of them were physical. Norman was stopping a man getting past him. Lise Malou was battling in midfield. So I think, although you don't want to sort of be proud of getting 6 yellows. I think in the circumstances, Norwich fans have been quite pleased to see it. So, as I say, one of those men was Kenny McLean, and I spoke to him after the match, and it was nice to be able to speak to him about a win.
I'm pleased we got the opportunity to speak to you, Kenny, because I think you came out after the 5-0 on Boxing Day, didn't you? And that must be really difficult for players to speak on a day like this. And this shows you how quickly football can change, can't it? So, how difficult is it to sort of keep headstrong when in the tough times?
I mean, we've all been in tough times. We've all, in football and in life, and none more so in the last couple of years. And we need to remind ourselves what we're doing, and we're doing something we love. We need to continue to work as hard as we can. And we know that we weren't doing well enough. We know we weren't, pleasing everybody, and the fans were disappointed, and so were we. That's just the way it was. But we knew that we had the character, and the character's a big thing, I think, that got us out of this. The character and the quality, that determination. We showed a real togetherness, because it wasn't a case of pointing fingers at each other. It was just a case of, looking at yourself in the mirror and realising that, can I do more? And everybody, I'm sure at the time, would have said, yes, I can, and we're doing more now. So we need to. This is a marker for us. This is the minimum that we need to show, that hard work, that commitment, that desire, because we know we've got quality that can get us out of this.
Yeah. Following on from what you were saying about the set pieces in training as well, the club put out the sort of usual video on Thursday, and it was showing your pressing work, when the 3 go into the opposition half and stuff. Is that very much sort of a good example of the things that Dean and Shaky have brought to the club since they've been here?
Yeah, well, as I say, 1 goal, 1 is the game today, because of that work that we're doing behind the scenes, because of that defensive unit that we've got. We defend from the front, everybody knows their jobs exactly. We'll analyse the team that we're playing against and where we want them to have the ball, where we don't want them to have it. That's just something we do from the Monday to Friday. Nobody really sees that except the little clips that you see on social media. But, we work so hard to do the right things and to put ourselves in the best place to go into games on a Saturday. And, it's shown now, because, as I say, defensively we've been solid. Last couple of games, clean sheets, and, things are looking good.
Back at Carrow Road on Wednesday night, the fans were excellent in the Everton game, weren't they? How much do you guys need them to be just like that and more? I suppose the same as you guys. You guys know you're doing well, but you still got to find another gear probably.
Yeah, I was in the house for the Everton game, so I've not been with the fans at Carrow Road for a while, but I'm looking forward to it. You can see them travelling their numbers again today, and listen, we know they're going to get behind us regardless, but when we're on this run, when belief's there, there's a bit of optimism, everybody's pulling in the one direction, it's going to be good on Wednesday. We need to put a performance on to match their support.
And just finally, you scored a rather famous header against Manchester City a couple of years ago. Warming up for next Saturday?
Let's see. No, listen, we're in a good mood. We'll look forward to Wednesday. We don't look forward to Saturday. I mean, it's the games come thick and fast. You need to take them game by game, just get as many points as we can. But hopefully, I can turn up Wednesday and maybe get another.
Top man. Enjoy it. Thank you.
We live Norwich City. The build-up.
The passion.
The drama.
The last-minute winners.
The debate.
That's why we've created PinkUn Plus.
The app that takes you beyond the headlines.
With exclusive columns, blogs, podcasts and videos, we've got you covered.
Subscribe today. PinkUn Plus. Stay ahead of the game.
Download now on the App Store and on Google Play.
Right, before we move on to Wednesday night and Palace, then I just wanted to reflect a bit on Todd Cantwell's exit. We saw him make his debut for Bournemouth Sunday night as they were embarrassed by losing to National League Boreham Wood at home, 1-0. Cantwell was chucked on at half-time as they tried to chase things. That's going to put a lot of pressure under Scott Parker, given that their promotion form has wobbled in recent months. But Pad, just to sort of wrap off Cantwell, and then hopefully we're probably not going to be talking about him again until the summer. It's just good to get it sorted, really, isn't it? And for that issue to not have to be a distraction for Dean Smith or the rest of the squad.
Yeah, and that's my take on it is what it means for Norwich now, that you have a player who, without reopening all the various strands, both the actual strands and the ones that people want to hypothesise about, but might not necessarily be the case about Todd Cantwell, Norwich City this season particularly, but maybe the last 2 or 3 seasons really. We kept talking about the high water point of maybe that first part of the last Premier League season. Yes, okay, he did have an impact in the Championship title winning season. But the Todd Cantwell, who was, doing his surfing celebration, scoring goals against Chelsea and Manchester United in the FA Cup, we haven't really seen that guy for a long, long time. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Not all of them at Todd's door, but, he's part of the situation that ended with him departing for Bournemouth on deadline day. And for me, I think that's a massive thing for Norwich now, that Norwich collectively as a group, Dean Smith, his coaches, the players who are here, as we have seen most recently at Wolves, they are united, they are together, they have a common cause. They're all rallying behind the flag of trying to keep Norwich in the Premier League. And, Todd Cantwell, for whatever reason, wasn't part of that. And that's not apportioning blame in any direction. It's the facts of the matter. Look at the amount of minutes he played under Smith and Farker this season. So you've got essentially an option there who isn't part of it. They don't think he's going to be part of it. He doesn't really want to be here. That much is clear. Good. Shake hands. You go and have a little tilt at Bournemouth and try and prove yourself there. And what will be, will be. There's a buy option, obviously. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he ends up at Bournemouth beyond the summer. He could well come back. If he does, Norwich will activate the clause, but then, the 1 year additional in his contract. But I think it's pretty clear they will look to sell him again in this coming summer if it's not to be Bournemouth. So I think essentially that is the end of Todd Cantwell at Norwich City for the foreseeable, wherever else his career takes him and whether he ends up back here towards the end of his playing days. But if he's not going to be part of it, then why have him around the place? And that's, from Norwich's point of view, I think a very good development. So now Dean Smith has a set of fully focused players who all want to be here fundamentally and all want to try and keep Norwich in the division. And obviously Todd Cantwell would have wanted to do the latter, but ultimately he wasn't going to play a role in it. So, it'd be interesting to see from afar how he gets on at Bournemouth. Just on a personal level, the lad, has to get his career going. And if this is a springboard for him to do that, then good luck to him, because, he is still a very talented young man and a very, very intelligent, very sharp individual who knows, without being told, that his career has basically gone down a cul-de-sac and only he can revive it and get it going again. Don't look in any other direction or feel that, you're being harshly treated or, you haven't got a fair crack of it. It's a fresh start. It's a new chapter. Go and make the most of it. And then we'll see which path he takes from the summer and onwards. But it had to happen. Norwich wanted it to happen. Cantwell wanted it to happen. And obviously it took right until the end of deadline day, but eventually it got done. So, good luck to the lad. Go and prove what a good player you are.
Yeah, and there's been loads of that on PinkUn Plus. Chris Sutton spoke about him, Ewan Roberts, both in their columns. So do go and check them out. We've had a sort of look back on Todd's career. So we can park that one for the time being. One Norwich loanee who there's a bit more of a positive story, and I'll come to you on that, Connor. As we're mentioning PinkUn Plus, you had a very nice scouting report and an interview with Barley Mumba from last weekend. Peterborough through to the fifth round as well, and are home to Manchester City. So I think we can be pretty sure that one's going to be on television. So what did you sort of learn? It's still early days, of course, in his loan, but what did you learn about Barley's opportunity there?
Yeah, so I went to watch him against Sheffield United. Obviously, the week when Norwich City weren't involved, they lost that game 2-0. I think the context you need to add around that is Peterborough had about 6 players out, maybe crucially Siriki Dembele, who subsequently went to join Bournemouth. But I think actually the posh owner who's fairly outspoken with these things, as we know. Yeah, exactly. Has subsequently said that Dembele actually came up to him 20 minutes before kickoff and said, I want to join Bournemouth. So not ideal timing around that, for example. But so they play a free, sort of like a 3-5-2 really, but essentially with wing back. So Mumba was on the right. He let it switch to the left, as we've seen him do with Norwich on occasion. And really, I think the main takeaway is probably how far left he has to go. I think there's clearly a very good player in there. Certainly going forward, there was one burst in the first half where he kind of beat 2 players with a run into the box, which was superb. Really good in tight spaces, very technical. But you can see why he's been sent to Peterborough, because he needs to work, as he said to me after the game, on his 1v1 defending. And where best to do that than a place where he's going to have to do a lot of 1v1 defending, because Posh didn't, certainly in the game that I watched, didn't have a lot of possession, really struggled to create anything from an attacking perspective. And he was really tested. So it does feel like a good place for his education, simply because Norwich want him to improve on a certain thing. And that is a place where he is going to improve on that certain thing, I think. And there are still little bits and pieces around the edges. I thought he was a bit slow to track back at points. But beyond that, I think it's clear to see to me that there's clearly potential. And I think we've all thought that whenever we've watched Bali Mumba play. And ultimately, you frame this debate around Max Aarons, because that's where it's heading. Because people will look at Bali Mumba as someone who can step into that. Obviously, Sam Byron fit again. And I thought he played well on Saturday from a Norwich perspective, actually. But Mumba, I think he's got a bit taller. He's got not massively, but he's obviously filled out a little bit as well, which I think helps. And I saw someone who's a lot closer to the frame of Max Aarons than I did last season, for example. So I'd say everything's moving in a positive direction. I think he's got a lot of minutes there now. I think when I looked at him, he's actually played more minutes for Peterborough than he has for Norwich. So that goes to show kind of the exposure that he's getting over there. He's got Darren Ferguson, who has obviously been around the block, experienced. He compared him to Daniel Farker, actually, in terms of how he wants his wing backs to play. And it's I see it as a very positive move. I must admit, I wasn't blown away or anything like that when I went to watch him, but I saw a young player who's in an important phase of his development. And if he can have a really good second half of the season, which ultimately culminates with Peterborough staying up and him contributing and putting in good performances. And, we obviously hope this isn't the case, but if Norwich do get relegated, then I think there's a really good championship option there. If not, then I think you've probably got a circumstance where, similarly to Sam McCallum, he's proven that he can probably do it in the championship. And then it would be about trying to get him a move at maybe a more established championship club, I would say. So, all the signs are positive. I've felt quite encouraged by watching him. And, if he can improve on his defensive side, then Norwich City will have a very, very well-rounded fullback, albeit one, I guess, similar to Max, really, who's quite small. So, lots to like, lots to work on. But I think for where he is right now, Peterborough's a good fit for him.
Yeah, as much as perhaps sadly, Todd Cantwell probably isn't going to be part of the future at Norwich City, I think we're all expecting that Bali Mumba probably will be one season, one way or another, and still very much has got time on his side. While we've been recording, actually, an interesting little line about a Norfolk boy, Dan Ashworth, has quit as Brighton's technical director and is supposed to be going in as Newcastle's director of football. So he's basically going to get to play real life football manager, isn't he? With as much money to spend as he wants. But he was with Norwich. He was on Norwich's books as a youth player, if I'm remembering that correctly. And then he sort of came up through the ranks as he was technical director at West Brom when Adi Boothroyd was there, and he was sort of linked to Boothroyd for quite a while, worked for the FA. So an interesting little line for a local guy there. Right, let's look ahead to this massive game on Wednesday night then, because we know that in conjunction with that very helpful result on Saturday and what looked like close to hurricane conditions as Roy Hodgson started with a 0-0 draw at Burnley, which is pretty much perfect for Norwich. There was a really funny interview on the BBC of them interviewing Hodgson after the game, and the reporter just saying, "Are you wondering why you've bothered to come back to football today?" While he's being absolutely battered by the wind. It almost doesn't look safe. The advertising board behind him is wobbling around and things, and he saw the funny side of it all. But anyway, that means Norwich is still outside of the relegation zone for the time being. We will see what the midweek action brings, but clearly get that win against Palace and they are going to be in a fantastic position. Tuesday night, Watford are at West Ham and Burnley are at home to Manchester United. So hopefully they will still be outside of the relegation zone by the time we kick off at Carrow Road, 7:45 on Wednesday night. So, Pad, I think we can safely assume Angus Gunn comes back in goal. Max Aarons comes in for Byram at right back. But then the real interesting element is the midfield, I suppose, isn't it? And whether they go back to the 4-4-2, whether it's 4-3-3 or what. But let's start in the engine room now that we've got Norman and Gilmore back in the mix. What do you think we're speaking ahead of the presser, of course, in terms of fitness updates and stuff. But as we sit here, what do you think is the most likely mix to be in central midfield?
Honestly, normally you do get a sense of where he might go with it. I think, he might give a few clues away at his presser, which you alluded to there, Dave, on Tuesday morning. For me, ultimately, it's obvious to say, but it really what happens in his central midfield is completely dependent on the setup, whether he wants to go back to the two, essentially, with two wider players, which, subject to him being okay illness-wise, I think would be Sargent one side, Rasheed to the other. They were key elements in those league wins over Everton and Watford. So in my mind, it's a no-brainer. If Sargent's fit, he comes back in, and then it's two essentially options. And I just get the sense probably when push comes to shove, he would go that route. I mean, they went with the three. It was interesting actually that that Palace debacle, if you want to call it that, was a three with Gilmour, McLean, and Molineux, and they were completely overran that day. Muscularity of Palace's. I think it was Will Hughes and Kouyate that day, wasn't it?
Yeah. Will Hughes looked like Zidane all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, numerically, they should have had enough numbers in there, but they just look lightweight in comparison. So I'm sure that'll be at the back of Dean Smith's mind, allied to, as I say, the switch to the 4-4-2, if we want to label it that, has really underpinned, these recent Premier League offerings. And if that's the case, then we're looking for two central midfielders. Norman, I think, comes in straight away. I think that was kid gloves to not start him at Wolves, but then give him a good 30 minutes. That smacked of basically just getting him back in the groove, getting his rhythm back to a degree with these games on the horizon. I think by common consent, I don't know anybody, fan or media alike, if you lined up all Norwich's available options in midfield and permed either a 2 or a 3, Matthijs Norman is in that because he is arguably their best midfield option. So he comes back in for me, and then it gets very interesting because does he go with Gilmour, does he go with McLean, or does he go with Molineux? And it's honestly hard to sort of anticipate where Smith's head is at with that, because all three of them, individually and paired with Norman, maybe offer slightly different things compared to the other two in that equation. So, if Norman is your anchor, your ballast, and then you're looking for a blend, and you saw how physical Palace were back in December, I think that probably rules out Gilmour for me from starting the game. And then it's a very, very interesting development. Then it probably comes down to the balance and who can operate on the other side of Norman. Molineux has certainly picked up the sense that he needed to add that aggressiveness to his game, and obviously got booked on Saturday. And you don't want him to start accumulating yellow cards, but it does show you that that element of what a central midfielder is all about, playing against Premier League teams, which he didn't really have up to probably these recent games. He seems to have harnessed that. Now, whether that's him getting to grips with what English football and the Premier League is all about, or whether Smith and Shakespeare have had a word with him and said he needed to add that to his game. But he's firmly in the conversation for me now, whereas before this run, you'd have put him to the side and said, when push comes to shove, no, I don't think you want to be starting Pierre Molineux because you won't get what you need in terms of the off-the-ball work. But we all know how much he likes McLean, and McLean is obviously the match winner at the weekend. So, I don't know, right here, right now, if it's going to be a 2, I think it's probably going to be, for me, I'm not saying Smith will go this route, but I'd probably go McLean and I'd probably go Norman. And then you've got Gilmour and Molineux to come into the mix. That would be a bit harsh on Molineux, but I think it's more a reflection of how much he likes McLean in there. A little bit like Farker did, his impact, his influence, his personality on the pitch. I think you get all that with McLean. We know there's elements to his game that maybe aren't quite Premier League standard week in, week out, but for what is a massive game in the context of Norwich's season from this point, you need big players, you need big characters and big personalities, and Kenny McLean is definitely all of those three. So I think he'll want McLean on the pitch, and he'll certainly want Norman on the pitch. So I think that's probably subject to Dean Smith throwing in any other curveballs between now and kick-off. If he's going with the 4, for me, Rashica, Norman, McLean, and Josh Sargent.
Excellent. Right. Well, I'm going to go 4-4-2, Norman and Molineux in the middle for me. Rashica, obviously, no debate at all there. He's just becoming such a reliable little player, isn't he? And both those chances he set up for Ida, he also won the free kick for the goal as well, didn't he? I think he is really finding a nice seam of consistency, and it's been quite impressive how quickly he's found that after coming back from injury as well. Sargent, given what I said in the first half of the pod, definitely comes back in on the right as long as he's fit enough. and that may be harsh on McLean. It is harsh on McLean, but I think Kenny is much more is going to be needed against Manchester City and Liverpool. I much more expect him to be in the starting lineup there, particularly if they go to a 3 at the back. But I'd go into it with saying, look, Norman's got an hour, then you've got the final half an hour. So he's just as important to this game as Norman. But the thing that's caught my imagination a little bit was literally dying seconds of the game. Norman threads that lovely ball through into the left channel to Pukki, clean through on goal, and Pukki just doesn't quite squeeze the shot past Kilman, does he? Sort of cuts back onto his right rather than hit it first time. And possibly you could argue that Pukki should have been doing better, but just the instinct from Norman to hit a classy pass like that, I think Norwich want to get on the front foot straight away. If they can get in front in this match with how up for it the crowd will be, I think that will then be difficult for Palace to come back into it. So it's maybe a bit bold, and it will depend on how Dean Smith is reading Norman's sort of stage of his recovery, because he is only just back into things, and whether he thinks he's ready for that. But for me, I'd be bold, I'd be front foot, I'd be looking to get at least a goal ahead up to that first hour. You're probably not going to pay him for the full 90 minutes, and then get Kenny McLean on, knowing that all those things you've teed up there, Pad, you've got Mr. Reliable, haven't you? He's going to get stuck in the aerial battles. He's going to be useful in both boxes. And he was very energetic and decent with the ball on Saturday as well. So it's good to have some options. It's good we can have this debate. And it was really interesting, I thought, in the training video the club put out before the Wolves game, they were showing the pressing work, weren't they? Where I think it was 10v10 and 3 attacking players had to go into the opposition half and press the ball while those 10 players tried to keep it. When you've got 10 players missing from training and stuff, as they did not that long ago, that sort of proper intensive work must be almost impossible. So it feels like they're moving in a very big direction. And of course, if they get this win, then they really are going to be running hot. Connor, what's your reading of it?
Yeah, I would agree. I kind of put this question to Dean on Friday before this game in terms of having players back and the options to shift formations. I think it's a really interesting debate now, because I think the evidence shows if Billy Gilmour's available, then Dean Smith would like to pick him. So I wouldn't completely take him out of this debate either. Palace play a 4-3-3 as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if Dean Smith went with a 4-3-3, but I think, to be honest, I think most fans would be disappointed with that, given what we saw with the 4-4-2 against Everton and Watford. But I think this is a slightly different game, given Palace are physical, they're robust. We all know what they like to do. They play a lot more football under Patrick Vieira than they did under Roy Hodgson as well. So he may feel like he wants to add them up. I'm not entirely sure what he'd do then at the top end of the pitch, whether, as we spoke about earlier, he'd stick with Ida, or if he went for Pukki. I'd personally like him to stick with a 4-4-2, if I'm being completely honest. I think then, as we said, you have the options later on to change it. And if I was going to pick a 2, I'd probably go for Norman and McLean. I think they're probably the most likely to, given what we've seen from him again so far, which is that he wants that spine of the team to contain those leaders that he leans on so heavily, the likes of Hanley, Gibson, obviously McLean as well. Pukki I'd put into that category as well. Usually it'd be Tim Krul in goal, wouldn't it? But it's not going to be the case on Wednesday. So yeah, I would like to see him go 4-4-2. I've got a funny feeling he might go 4-3-3, just because of the midfield options he has available, and I think he'll want to get Norman, McLean and Gilmour all into the same team. So I think it's really intriguing, because ultimately if he does do that and Norwich lose the game and he doesn't play the 4-4-2, people are going to be pointing at and go, well, why didn't you just use the formula that won the last 2 games? But by the same token, I think there is a debate. It certainly was the case against West Ham, that if you play against a 3 in midfield, you can get overran a little bit. So I'm really intrigued to see what he does and how he approaches it. I hope he goes for the 4-4-2. And like you say, Dave is brave and bold with it. My instinct says maybe he'll look to be a bit more pragmatic, given the significance of the game for Norwich City, and go for the 4-3-3. But as you both said, nice to have this debate, considering the options that they have back and available.
The front 3 suits Sargent nicely as well, doesn't it? It's kind of the perfect place for him. So, it's really interesting. As we teed up there, he's got a delicate decision to make. But for me, I think Lys Molineux is maybe almost a little bit underrated now in terms of his importance. I wouldn't have him out of my 11 personally. And Gilmour, I thought, there were good moments in there. Second half, I thought he basically looked like he was running on empty. So that's a reminder that he was just coming back from injury. And the game felt to me like it was totally passing him by before he got substituted. But there are a few moments in the first half, given that the main thing Gilmour is offering you is his passing ability, where there was one that stuck in my mind with Brandon Williams, because I was doing him as our player watch, where Williams wanted to pass to him and he just wasn't moving into space. He almost seemed to be running behind Wolves players instead of offering for a simple ball. So for me, I struggle to see how he has got much of a role to play against Man City or Liverpool, either because of his defensive side of his game. I still don't think that's convincing enough. But we all still know there's a great deal of talent in there. So it's I'm kind of trying to reserve judgment on Gilmour and see this as a second coming for him. It's just the opportunity for him to start showing what he's really about. But for me personally, he's not in my starting 11 on Wednesday night, and I struggled to see it against Man City and Liverpool. But I'm very happy to be proven wrong. It's good to see all these assets available to Dean Smith, which I think tees up a really exciting game. So, boys, thank you very much for your thoughts. Thank you all very much for listening. We'll, of course, have it all covered for you on the PinkUn Plus app. If you're not already subscribed, then please do check it out. You still get your first 30 days for free. It's only $1.99 a month, or you can pay for the year up front at $19.99 to get a bit of a discount of about £4 as well. But we've had loads of good stuff on there. We're really pleased with it, and we'll keep ramping things up in the months ahead. And thankfully, we've got some real good Premier League meat to get our teeth into in the months ahead, hopefully with plenty of good things to talk about as well. But for now, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for listening, and we will catch up with you again on Wednesday night.